Thank you very much. So, good morning all, and thank you for joining. Obviously, Martin has covered the majority of my introduction, but the reason we're here today is to talk around sustainability within the end-using computing space. I think in the past it was a secondary information in terms of looking at it would always be around shiny and new, and speaking to end users 5 years ago in terms of how would you attract new members of staff, say coming out of university, for example, would be to give them the latest, greatest kit. When we speak to customers and organisations now, it's around showing the green credentials to attract new members of staff. And we'll run through that today, and then obviously we'll also run through what IGEL is in terms of technology and what we can offer organisations to lower their carbon footprints, reduce the cost, but still give a fantastic EUC service. So, who cares about the planet? Is a very open-ended question. I'm sure everyone in this room would put their hand up and say, yep, we all care about the planet. What we're looking at here is the demographics in terms of moving forward and what we're seeing. So we'll take TikTok, for example. Now, TikTok is not a social media platform that I use. I think I may be slightly too old for TikTok, and I've certainly not got the dance moves that I've seen on TikTok. But this was taken back in March. So in March, for the year to date to March, and now we believe it's over 3 billion. But on the hashtag sustainability search, there was 1.7 billion hits on TikTok. And if you look at the demographic and the age tradition that use TikTok, it's that younger demographic. It's that from a teenage age up to sort of leaving university age. So it really shows that the younger generation, people leaving university to look at moving into the corporate world, are very big on sustainability. You then move on to Twitter, which is more my range, and probably the range from leaving university onwards. So per hour on Twitter, there's 692,000 views on sustainability per hour. So what does this mean? Again, you've got the younger generation on TikTok who are looking heavily into sustainability and driven by sustainability. And then you're looking at that generation up on Twitter that, again, are looking into sustainability. And this is key to, A, attracting new staff and understanding that market, and understanding that sustainability is not a secondary thought anymore, and it is key to moving forward. And finally, Google, which obviously everybody uses across the globe. And over the last 5 years, the sustainability search has grown by 1,650%. So this is just to give you a bit of a flavour. It's not obviously directly linked to IGEL, but it's to give you a flavour of who cares about the planet, and that's everybody. And some of the reasons why are on this next slide. I'll just bring them up. So from, obviously, none of these are UK based, but if we look back this summer in the UK, I'm sure that nobody, or certainly myself, I wasn't comfortable in 40 degrees heat. I got told that I looked quite poorly on a video call with a customer and got told to go and take a lie down, which was not a great experience when I had a fan 4 inches from my head and still couldn't cope. But it really showed, and I think it's the first time that I've seen personally in the UK where you felt that climate change issue, the sustainability issue, the CO2 emissions issue locally. On a more global scale, you look at Pakistan, this is still going on today, and a third of their country was underwater. Again, this is due to climate change, something that from a human race we need to change. And I was at a meeting with a charity recently who mentioned to myself that from a sustainability, from a climate change perspective, it's not to save the planet. The planet will always be there. It's to save ourselves, the human race. We'll be the ones that feel the pinch, not the planet necessarily. So with all these news stories that have been out in the past 1, 2, 5 years, I think it's really hitting home and driving that sustainability message, driving the end user computing message. And that's when I was at a CIO event recently, which was primarily based around security. And when speaking to various C-level execs at organisations from different verticals, from public to private, they mentioned about sustainability, and sustainability ended up being that key conversation rather than the security conversation. So, why am I here today? I'm here today because EUC has a huge part to play. I'll start off with the middle one, consumption. So everybody here, I imagine, will be very familiar with the consumption of EUC, with the battery life, with powering down devices, with putting them in hibernation to lower power. Consumption today is still very, very critical. And I will show later around the IGEL OS on the impact on consumption. But on a whole, consumption is becoming less critical in comparison to devices and e-waste because of renewable energy, decarbonising the national grid, etc. So from a consumption perspective, yes, it's still important, but from my personal perspective, it's not as important as devices, in terms of manufacturing, mining and gaining new devices in e-waste. And I will explain further in this presentation around devices and e-waste on why it is so critical. So, devices. So, on a standard device, most end users would take a 3 to 5 year warranty cycle, which we would average at a 4-year refresh cycle on any device. 83% of the carbon footprint, the carbon emissions of a device is during the manufacturing process. Now, what do I mean from a manufacturing process? That's mining, that's creating, and that's delivering. So even if you never unbox the devices, you never turn the devices on, the damage is effectively already done, because the use of the device makes up around 17%, so less than a fifth of the carbon emissions, the carbon footprint of that device. So the damage is done. So this is where we're looking at now from a refresh cycle perspective. How can we be more sustainable within the EUC space? And I will come on to that later. So this is just to give this will give a visual on what it takes to make a laptop, a device. So when you see a laptop, you may see it's made in X country. You may not understand it. You may not even, most people aren't, and to be fair, I was the same. I never thought of what it takes to make a device. You get a device, you open the box, you're happy you've got your new device. You may not know the efforts and the issues that are created. So final assembly, that's fine, and that's what we know from an end user perspective. We just see the final assembly, it comes to our desk, brilliant. And then you've got the mining. So for one laptop, these, and this again, you can see from every continent around the world is where these are mined for one device. So this is for a single device. So then this now brings into play that 83%. You can start building a picture of where the 83% is coming from. Obviously, mining is terrible in general, and a lot of these raw materials, by the time we get to 2030, 2035, will no longer exist because of the amount we're mining these materials, the amount of EUC, and you think of multiple devices as well. It's, yeah, they're going pretty quickly. And then they have to get shipped all back to one location for the final assembly point. So again, shipping is a major issue. Everyone will be well aware of that transportation has devastating impacts on the planet. And then its final destination, shipping back out. And that is where your 83% comes from. So as I mentioned, if you never turn on that device, the damage is done with this. The mining, the creating, the delivery of the device. This is where the impact is made. So, you know, lowering the brightness of your screen will only have a very, very minimal impact in comparison to mining and manufacturing the devices. Hope that makes sense. So this is a vendor's laptop. We don't want to give the vendor away, but this is public material. Now, most major vendors publish the carbon footprint of the device. So this is picked up, but we didn't want to seem like we was targeting a particular vendor. So, for a standard 15-inch laptop, the whole life cycle for a carbon footprint is 379 kilos. 314 kilos of that is from the manufacturing process. So if you think about, you take 1,000 laptops every 4 years, as an example, would be 380 tons of life cycle for those 1,000 machines. 314 tons of CO2 emissions are from the manufacturing process. So that's where the issue is, and that's 1,000. You talk about the millions that are shipped globally every year. It has a huge impact. For one laptop, and we often hear an organisation speak, and it's brilliant that they do, offset your carbon emissions. It's a very hot topic. To offset one single laptop, you would have to grow and plant 4 fully mature trees. A fully mature tree takes around 100 years to grow. So when you're offsetting, and it also costs a lot of money to plant a lot of trees, but if you're offsetting one laptop, you have to grow 4 fully mature trees. So it's 100 years to offset a laptop. If you think 1,000 laptops, you're going 4,000 trees, which is, again, is a huge amount. One thing, and again, my background, I've worked for a different vendor. I've only been at IGEL for around a year. But one thing I used to always hear is the reason an organisation would replace laptops would be because the battery would die. When if you look at battery, replacing the battery is only 1.7% of the carbon footprint of the device. The impact is the chassis and the compute, which is over 60%. So if you replace the battery, that has a massive positive impact on the planet rather than just ripping and replacing a device. And I promise this will get a little bit more upbeat as we go on. It's not going to be this tone all the way through. So traditional IT thinking. And if I could get a show of hands, who in this room has either worked for an organisation or from a personal perspective has looked at these and you've used these techniques to lower your energy? So, or you may get told by your business, we're putting hibernation policies in place, we'll save the planet, which is great. But in general, this is such a small percentage of the carbon footprint, the carbon emissions, that doing that is not enough. And when you used to turn your laptop on, you'd have the recycling badge, you'd go around the screen. It's not enough moving forward. Turning down your screen brightness, yes, it will have a positive impact, but very, very minimal. Putting the device to sleep, again, the same, it's very, very minimal. So what we're looking to do is obviously extend the life cycle of those devices. We want to eradicate that 3 and 4 year refresh cycle, and I will move on soon to how we can do that. So a big topic is e-waste. So in 2021, the world generated an estimated 57 million tonnes of e-waste. So obviously this is not just end user computing, this is e-waste in general. That could be a fridge freezer, it could be a microwave, it could be an oven. And I think I've seen, and again, I've spoken to many people, is it's kind of out of sight, out of mind. You're not going to walk around the corner in Edinburgh or Manchester in London and see a landfill site full of end user computing. It's not something that in the UK we see. So when we get rid of a laptop or a device, we often don't think, I wonder where that's going. I wonder where the final destination of that device is. You get rid of it, you get your new laptop and you're good to go. You don't really think about what, or you may not think about what the consequences are. And I know certainly in the past I didn't. It wasn't something I thought of. But 57 million tonnes of e-waste, that is sat around in landfill. The equivalent of that is 350 cruise ships each year. And if you think, again, I've never been on a cruise person, but if you think of the size of a cruise ship, and imagine dumping 350 million cruise ships a year in various countries around the world, various places around the world, and just leaving it. My colleague genuinely copied and pasted those ships. So I'm not sure how long it took. So if there is less than 350, there's 349, please let me know and I will flag it back to Ben. But again, this is just to give you a visual around, you know, the importance of keeping devices for longer and not just chucking them into landfill, not just what we see as recycling, because the majority will go to landfill. And landfill doesn't just have, you know, e-waste isn't just an issue for the planet. The issue on the population that live in those areas is shocking and a travesty. And I will go into what I mean by that, but the cost for the humans, the people that live within those locations is much worse than just the planet. There's a real human cost to this. So the real cost of e-waste, so adverse child health. So you're looking at lung problems, you're looking at cancer, cardiovascular diseases, DNA damage, chronic diseases later in life. So this is all from e-waste. And there is a documentary, I can't remember the name, it is on Netflix, that explains e-waste, especially I think it's based around North Africa. And it explains the e-waste. And again, I was with the gentleman who is the founder of a charity who does work in the likes of Sierra Leone and Ghana, who was saying that there's children that will burn the e-waste so they can collect the metal underneath it. So if you are burning laptops on a pile, you know, the impacts that will have on your health and your lungs is absolutely shocking. And that's why, you know, we need to, as a planet, as humans, we need to cut down e-waste. It's not, you know, it's not fair for these people who have to live in landfill and next to landfills. It's something we really, really need to change, and we can't keep waiting to change it. It's something that we need to change today. So here's the happy part. What's the solution? So the solution is simple from an IGEL perspective. It's the end of 4-year refresh cycle. So if I could ask for a show of hands, who in this room has a refresh cycle between, say, 3 and 5 years for laptops or desktops? I think it's the industry standard. And every 4 years you'll get 1,000 or 500 or 100 new Windows 10, Windows 11 machines. Fantastic. What we're proposing is 24-year refresh cycle. Now, how do you do that? It's not easy. No, a lot of the time after 4 years, the laptop won't be running great. You'll get a lot of help desk tickets. You want to replace those laptops. Or you may be in a finance model with a particular vendor, and every 4 years they're on a refresh cycle. So, and this may sound controversial, but we are a partner with Windows or with Microsoft. but we're saying take Windows off the endpoint. Now, what we mean by that is put Windows into the data center, into the cloud. A lot of the applications in general, in this day and age, are SaaS-based anyway, so you don't really need Windows on the endpoint. And a lot of organizations are accessing their applications either via a local browser, via VDI, Citrix, VMware, Microsoft, for example. So you don't potentially need Windows on the endpoint. Now, why is it good for the refresh cycle if you take Windows off the endpoint? So from an IGEL perspective, we offer a very thin, light, secure, Linux-based operating system. When you put a thinner, lighter OS on the endpoint in general can run for a longer period of time because it's not got the pressures to run Windows. It doesn't need the performance to run a heavier operating system. And even though Windows 10 is fantastic, you can still access your Windows environment, but just not directly from the endpoint, from your infrastructure, from cloud. So if you take that off the endpoint and we say, okay, you replace that with the IGEL OS, for example, and instead of your 4-year refresh cycle, you change that to an 8-year refresh cycle, and you've got 1,000 devices. In that 4-year period where you would normally refresh, you're saving 380 tons of CO2 emissions. And as well, reducing costs, of course. You know, it's not cheap to refresh devices. So that's what we're saying is take Windows off the endpoint for a thinner, lighter, and very secure OS. So, what is that? Just again, a show of hands. Has anybody worked with IGEL, understand that, know anything about IGEL at all? Got one at the back, got a couple. Okay, so IGEL is let's bring this slide up. So IGEL is an alternative operating system to Windows. It would be traditionally classed maybe as a thin operating system, but effectively it's an edge OS to work on any x86 device to access any applications at any time, whether that's laptop, desktop, thin client, workstation, etc. Very, very light operating system. We've got our management suite, which is a centralized management suite, which is the universal management suite. We've got ICG, which is the cloud gateway, especially for remote working. Obviously, pre-COVID, that may not have been as important, but since COVID, obviously, there's that hybrid working for most organizations. And it's just about connecting into whether you're connecting into Citrix, into VMware, or just through a local browser and connecting into your SaaS applications, where realistically you don't need Windows on that endpoint. So from an IGEL perspective, it's very stripped back, it's very simple, and it's very secure and very easy to manage. Managing a thin operating system takes much less overheads than managing a larger operating system. From a security perspective, it is a read-only operating system. So much more secure than a standard operating system. What we also offer, and something, again, we've been having conversations around, and I'm guessing if you all work in IT here, you'd have had these conversations around Cyber Essentials. Cyber Essentials, especially with Bring Your Own Device now being brought into scope on Cyber Essentials, we offer what's called a UD Pocket. Fortunately, we've not got it on these slides. But a UD Pocket is effectively a USB stick with IGEL. You plug that into your device, it sits on top and airtights your current device. So as soon as you turn it on, you plug it in, it will then run IGEL. Then when you plug that out, it will go back to that original device. So if somebody's bringing their own device in and they don't necessarily want all the policies from the company being on their local laptop, you can plug IGEL in and it will replace for that session the, say, Windows OS, for example. So we're seeing that become more prominent in the bring your own device space, or contractors, for example, that you can just ship them out an IGEL OS and you know once they plug that in, they're in a secure environment. So again, efficiency, I spoke briefly on earlier, but running an IGEL OS can reduce power consumption by more than 22%, which again is important, especially in this day and age. I was speaking to an NHS just recently that mentioned they would like to move to a thinner OS because of the price of their electricity bill. And it was as simple as that. We want to lower our costs. If we can save 22%, for example, on X number of endpoints, then it lowers our electricity bill. So it was a very straightforward conversation. Then you obviously find the sustainability, management, security piece, it brings the solution together. So the value of IGEL. So use devices for longer. That's the reason we're here today, to say instead of that 4-year refresh cycle, use those devices for 8 years, for 10 years. So as well as saving the planet, you're saving costs, you're making it more secure, and you're making it easier to manage. It is a fantastic solution that is growing in the UK and globally. Consumption, again, I was just talking about, lower your consumption, lower your power by, instead of running a Windows OS on the endpoint, you run it from the cloud and run a thin operating system. And finally, maybe more, and I'd say most important, is e-waste. you know, again, I would urge you to watch the Netflix documentary around e-waste, but to show that it has a detrimental effect on not health of just adults, but especially in children, which we can't let continue. So when you add all those together, I think we've got a very, very comprehensive offering. So this is a case study from a finance organisation who are based, I believe, in Edinburgh. So, and this was during COVID, and again, the case study's on our website, but during COVID, they repurposed 3,150 devices. And when we did the research on the carbon footprint saving, and I'll be honest, the reason for this at the time was not a carbon footprint saving. I believe it was more a cost saving exercise, but then we showed the benefits of this is what you've actually done to the planet. From a good perspective, say 425,000 kilos of CO2 emission. That is the equivalent to 500 acres of mature forest, whilst not having to replace 3,150 physical devices. So the cost saving, again, is huge. So when you add them both together, it's a real story. Yeah, from my perspective, that's all I wanted to talk to you around today. Again, we're open for questions. If you've got any questions at all, or any concerns, or yeah, we're more than happy. And I've got Jackie, if you've got any technical questions, Jack's the tech lead as well.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
So we do have a roving mic if you do wish to ask a question. Is it any questions for Ricky so far?
Oh, that, yeah, sorry, I've just got comfy. This is where it goes really wrong now, and I think, oh, wow. Okay.
Hi, Tamara, AWS.
Okay.
Do you have numbers on what this energy consumption of the overall infrastructure is when you've moved it to the cloud? So do you have the comparison numbers? So you've got them before on the total amount reduced. Do you have equivalent numbers for that entire ecosystem, which is then running on cloud infrastructure?
So from an infrastructure perspective, I'm not sure. So we partner with a company called PX3, who are an independent company. So it's not, obviously we don't say the figures ourselves. So we work with PX3, who can work with us to get those figures. But yes, that's certainly a conversation we could have. But yeah, we would work with PX3, who are verified at that.
Other hands up questions? Thank you, gentlemen. Right. Good, here we'll come to you in a minute. Okay.
I'm interested to know, because a lot of the reasons why large-scale enterprise businesses will do a tech refresh cycle of 4 years is to mitigate the impact on productivity as a result of increased hardware failure on end-user devices.
Yeah.
I don't see a solution from this to mitigate that increased rate of hardware failure after 4 to 5 years.
So in general, so what we see is that once you change the operating system, so if you move to a thinner operating system, the resource you need on the end user device is much less. So it's not using the resource to the impact it would have had before. So in general, then you can run the devices for longer. So one of the things we have to say to a customer is, say they've got a 5-year-old device and it's not running well. Say it's running really slowly and you know, it's had failures, is we say, okay, for a test perspective, put the IGEL OS on there and then see how it runs. Now, what I can't do, and what I would never say, is we could guarantee you wouldn't have a hardware failure in that time, because obviously from our perspective, any IT kit can go wrong at any time. But in general, you know, and we've seen this across the board, and we've got case studies around this, is that these devices will be able to run for longer in general. But we couldn't guarantee, say if somebody come with a 10-year-old device and say, I want another 5 years, we couldn't guarantee it. But what we can do is say that in general, and the research that we've done, and again, we can put you in contact with our technical team over in Germany, is to really show you the reasons why you could run those devices for longer. But the main reason is because you need much less resource. And that's where, if you look at a traditional thin client, for example, a thin client could run for over 10 years, and they just keep running and running because of the really thin OS and the minimal power and resource that needs to run those devices. But yeah, we couldn't guarantee you'd have a hardware failure. I hope that answers your question.
I used to work for Sun Microsystems. I remember Sunray very well, and thin clients were a fond memory.
Yes, I think you'll know. Yeah, this is recorded, but we can always have a catch up afterwards. Yeah.
questions. One's
Yeah.
very specific to this, and one's just a sort of general point I'd be interested in your
Okay.
opinion on. Specific to this, you say that it's moving the operating system out into the cloud.
Yeah.
Are you running your own dedicated data centers? Are you using AWS? Are you using Azure? Where exactly are you building this? Where is this cloud?
So from an agile perspective, so it's not an agile cloud. So what we're seeing is obviously customers moving to whether that's AWS, Azure. So we partner with the major cloud vendors in regards to ensuring that the Agile OS will connect into those infrastructures. But it's not an agile cloud, but we are seeing a trend of organizations moving the OS of Microsoft, for example, off the endpoint onto whether that's cloud or their infrastructure, and then just almost publishing that desktop back to the endpoint, and that's a trend we're seeing. I don't know, Jack, if you want to add to that from a technical perspective.
Yeah, I can talk to that slightly. So we work very closely with all the major vendors on this front to make sure that you always get the best possible experience in with whatever kind of like cloud setup for your desktops or apps you choose for this kind of journey. Either be it Microsoft, Citrix, VMware, we always have day one releases of all their clients built into our solution. Any new features are already available in that. Anything is already set in and built in, ready for you guys to make the best utilization of. But we are effectively agnostic from what our platform does with that. You pick whichever solution in the cloud is best for you from an application or a desktop delivery service. And we will make sure that you can connect to that and use all the features you guys need to in your environment without having to worry about, is the right version of this client installed on the person's endpoint? Do I need to make sure do I have to update this in a slightly more complicated patched way as you would from a normal Microsoft update perspective?
Thank you. And my second question, as I said, is a much more general one. I'm just curious on your opinion. Extending the life of an end-user device from 4 years to 8 years to 10 years, pick a number, is obviously a very cool thing to be able to do from a sustainability point of view. But there is an element to which it seems a little bit like kicking the can down the road in terms of overall carbon output. As you say, 83% is at the point of manufacture. If we delay that manufacture by a few years, that's all well and good, but it still takes place. And once the carbon's up there, it's rather difficult to get out. I was curious if you had any thoughts on lowering the carbon at point of manufacture. Obviously, that's not something we do, but I'm interested in your thoughts on it.
Yep, so obviously it's not something we can do because we're not manufacturing the laptops, but obviously major laptop vendors are looking at obviously the manufacturing process to lower the carbon footprint. What I would say, obviously you mentioned kicking the can down the road, which is a great point. So once you've got the Agile license, you own that. So for example, say if your refresh cycle was this year and you moved onto an Agile OS and then you refreshed in 2026. And then normally after that, you would refresh in 2030. For example, you go back to the 4 year. But if you're still using Agile, obviously you pick the license up off the device that you're replacing, put it on the new device, and then you can get 8 years from that new device. So you're effectively missing one refresh cycle every 2. That is the proposal. We're not saying that obviously, because at some point you always need to replace hardware, because they will get hardware failure and you will have hardware issues. But if we're saying refresh, skip a cycle out of every 2, then and you save 400 tons of CO2 emissions each time, that's the proposal. Hope that makes sense.
Yes.
Thank you.
So, any more questions from the audience? I was going to ask about the total cost of ownership of carbon.
Hello.
Yeah, I was just going to say there on that kind of bit about the manufacturer side. I mean, I think there's obviously a good trend at the moment. We're seeing like manufacturer framework coming out of laptops where almost every single part is replaceable. And again, when you do that huge carbon investment in a chassis, like realistically, a laptop chassis, like now, as long as you're paying for a decent one in the first place, that should, no reason why that couldn't last 10 years.
Yeah.
And just have like almost all the internals place. And HP's new EliteBook, the Generation 9 ones, they're going for that, like basically everything is replaceable in that. You could keep that going feasibly much longer if HP obviously commit to replacing that. I just wanted to ask some kind of in terms of a technical one. Obviously, IGEL's kind of, you're installing end client on the device, it's integrating with the cloud you've selected and everything like that to make sure that the kind of virtual desktop people are landing on has got what they need, the set they need. Is it also managing the kind of spin up and spin down of virtual machines so that obviously, you know, at night where, you know, you've obviously got very, very few users who are actually really on a laptop, and is all that is ideal kind of spinning all those virtual machines, the resource sending down in the cloud to reduce energy use, costs, you know, wear and tear on infrastructure.
So from the actual infrastructure piece itself, that's something that would be managed by whatever vendor you choose for that and whatever kind of integrated technologies that you've picked to put in place in that stage. We wouldn't manage your cloud infrastructure as such. The IGEL piece is fully to do with the endpoint device and managing the endpoint device itself. From actually like powering off a device running the IGEL OS, yeah, you can have that set to run in a scheduled way so that devices turn off at certain points at night, etc. I mean, if you had a load of devices sat in an office somewhere, you can have them boot up at a certain time in the morning, shut down at a certain time at night. You can have them do various bits like that to help with the consumption is a smaller piece of the carbon issue on this, but it does still help when you do things like that. But yeah, from the actual cloud infrastructure perspective, that would be based around the partner you chose and their integrations on that. There are quite a few add-on services for different solutions that do specifically what you're saying there. Not just the native stuff that comes with those, but there are other companies that we partner with that do that as well.
Thanks. Any more questions? Okay, I think we've got about time then.
Perfect.
Thank you very much. So I just want to say thanks so much, Ricky.
Thank you.
And yes, just keep an eye out on the rest of the agendas. I think there's a big board upstairs, which is the exhibition hall, where everything is. If you get lost, there's staff kicking you about with the event, staff t-shirts as well. If you get lost, just ask any member of staff and they'll direct you to your next appointment for meeting. So for now, thanks so much.
Thank you.